Hello and welcome to the Preparing for Success webinar series. And today it's the final webinar in our series. And the title is Finding Your Way Forward, Matching Your Skills to Employment Opportunities in conversation with Commonwealth Alumnus Suzette Lewis. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by alumnus Suzette Lewis, who will be sharing her career and professional experience following her Commonwealth scholarship. Suzette is an examiner at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which is the central bank for 8 islands in the Eastern Caribbean. She currently serves on the Alumni Advisory Panel for the CSC, where she provides personal insight and expertise to contribute to the development of the CSC's activities. And this webinar series is one such activity that Suzette has been supporting and helping us to develop. She's a 2015 Commonwealth Scholar from St Vincent and the Grenadines, and she completed a Master's in Finance at City University of London. Thank you, Suzette, so much for joining us today and also for agreeing to talk about what is quite a big topic and something that I'm sure a lot of the scholars on the call will be anxious about, excited about, lots of feelings around kind of employment and what you do with your studies when you're looking for a new career or just returning to a previous post. Is there anything that you would like to add to your bio and your introduction before we go into the main webinar?
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here, Kirsty and the team. I'm delighted to be part of the webinar series, and I'm just excited for this conversation,
Thank you so much. We were just talking before this started about sort of the engagement that we've had with the other webinars and the series more generally, and that these are big topics that we're going to talk about, but hopefully it will help to sort of navigate some things that we know scholars will be thinking about before they return home and maybe make them less scary or help people find pathways and ways of thinking about the next steps following the scholarship experience. So we're going to talk about employment and employability, and I think it really just makes sense to understand a little bit more about your current role and your responsibilities. So can you tell us about what you do now?
So, as you would have alluded to in the bio, I am currently employed with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and for those who don't know, it's the monetary authority for 8 of the smaller islands within the Eastern Caribbean, and they refer to them as the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Within that, I am part of the Financial Sector Supervision Department, a bit of a mouthful, FSSD, and within that, I'm also in the Anti-Money Laundering Supervisory Unit, and our responsibility is to ensure that is for supervision and regulation of the financial sector within the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. And within the Anti-Money Laundering Supervision Unit, we are responsible for ensuring that our entities that we regulate are in compliance with the various AML, which is anti-money laundering legislation within the Eastern, within their jurisdiction, because each jurisdiction have their own AML legislation as well. And also that they are in compliance with international best practices on money laundering and terrorist financing, counter-proliferation risk. And also, very importantly, that they are in compliance with the Financial Action Task Force recommendation, which the Financial Action Task Force is the global watchdog for anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So a bit of a lot if you have not heard about this topic before, but yes. So what we do on a daily basis is that we would look at our LFIs, which we call the licensed financial institution, make sure that they are in compliance with this through off-site monitoring. We also do on-site monitoring where we visit each of the islands, each of the institutions, look at what they're doing. We also engage with the national authorities who are responsible for this for AML. So we would engage on like changes in legislation, anything that has to do with money laundering. So most of us sit on the National Anti-Money Laundering Committees, which we call NAMLOCs, within the different jurisdictions. Also, we engage with the countries when they do national risk assessment, because we would have to do our sectoral assessment as well. We also engage when they are doing mutual evaluation reports. And I think for us in this unit, this is our objective. The mutual evaluation is the pinnacle of what we do all our work for. Because mutual evaluation reports, MERs as we would call them, they are published on the FATF, Financial Action Task Force website, and also the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, which is the FATF style body for us in the region website. So bad reports, we may cause our countries to be blacklisted or grey listed. So we won't want that. So for us, we work towards ensuring that we get a proper report. So a mouthful, but that is in short what we do.
Thank you so much. And it's really interesting just to understand, I guess, the size of the work that you do and the various different task forces that you're feeding into, but also that your work is very public. It's very exposed. As you said, a bad report, it just has huge negative ramifications, and that makes the work that you do so much more valuable as well, but also it brings extra scrutiny to it. So I think that was a brilliant introduction to not just your role, but the responsibility that you hold within that. Was this the job that you returned to post scholarship? And if not, how did you get to where you are now?
So I'm from St. Vincent. So when I got a scholarship, I was in St. Vincent and I was working with the Financial Services Authority. On a more granular scale, I was also involved in supervision and regulation within my country, within the insurance and pension unit. So that was the work that I did prior to the scholarship and the work that I did when I came back. So I would have left the FSA and St. Vincent in 2021. So in the height of a pandemic, and went to the ECCB.
So just to kind of, I guess, understand them, there's obviously some years there, which I presume sort of following your master's, that would have been about 2016 to 2021. And as you rightly meant, height of pandemic, a job move during that we will talk about that, I think. But what was happening in those years in between? Were they kind of growth years? How did you sort of navigate that career development coming straight out of your scholarship into a job that you had previously been doing? Did that feel different? Did you look at it in a different way with new knowledge or new skills?
Definitely, I would have looked at it. When I came back, I think coming back to St. Vincent as a Commonwealth scholar, somebody know that I have my master's degree. I think the expectation, because I came back to my same job, because I had a job, I went on a study leave, and I came back to the job. I think the challenge is that the expectation was high. I'm now a scholar, a Commonwealth scholar. I now have a master's, so I had a high expectation from my employers as well, and a high expectation for me. I see it, as you said, as the years that I used to grow. I use them as, those expectations was hard at first, but then I realized that, even within that space, I can use my master's. I can use the experience that I gained when I was in the UK to navigate doing my work. And it was around the same time, my country, they went through their national risk assessment. I think that was the first time that I actually had my very first introduction to AML, which I'm currently doing. So you can see that correlation now, that I was able to do a national risk assessment for the first time in my whole job. And I think at that point, that was when I actually utilized what I did, my analysis, from my master's, my financial analysis. I had to use that. I had to come up with, ways of gathering this information. The same thing that I was doing in my master's, I was able to use it within that space. So I would definitely say those years between 2026 and 2020 were basically used as growth for the work that I currently do now.
That's really helpful to understand. And I think one of the things that you mentioned is that the expectations when you returned were high. You come back from your masters, you'd had a scholarship to do them. These are all things that kind of naturally, people perceive you differently because of that. Something interesting that you mentioned is that your expectation from your employers was high, but also from yourself. And I wonder if you can just talk to me or unpack a little bit. How are the expectations high from your employer, and in what ways were they high from yourself as well?
Yeah, I figured when I came back, my employees were like, you have a master's. I think somehow people think that because you have a master's that, that you move from A to Z in no time. So I think they expected me to do more, and I guess like bring more to the table. And I felt that as well. And for me myself, I felt like, I no longer just have a bachelor's. I have a scholarship. I went to the UK. I have this master's. What can I do? I think for me, I pushed myself. Like I wanted a promotion. I wanted to achieve more. But I think in that time, what I learned is patience. I think that's what you need to for me, that's what I very learned. You have to have patience. And even though you have your degree, it does not beat practical experience. Learning a job, applying what you have learned, it helps so much. And I think getting that patience, knowing that, you know, that everything doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while, you learn, and that getting more job experience. And I think now looking back and doing what I'm doing and seeing where I've come, I've realized that, I needed to be there. I needed to get that on the job training, that I needed to get that patience to know that things doesn't happen overnight. So it was a learning experience, and I'm grateful for it.
Mm. I'm so glad that you've mentioned kind of those I guess skills that you had to implement. Being patient is one of the hardest skills I think that you can learn, and it's a real test to yourself to be able to say, I have this time to really think about what I learned and where I can apply it, and that I don't know how to apply it until I give myself the time to do it. I think it's a really important thing to note, and hopefully something that scholars on the call can kind of really learn from as well. In terms of, I guess, the expectations that you've mentioned, were you surprised that there were these expectations in terms of when you were thinking about going home, when you were coming to the end of your masters? Did you kind of expect people to be sort of waiting for you to come back and to suddenly be able to do things, or was that a bit of a culture shock for you?
I think it was a bit of a shock because I figured that I had my bachelor's and that's what I came in there for. So I think it was a bit of a shock, but I also understand that, they're saying that what they're coming from because you went away for a year, you're in a different culture, different space. Um, for me, for those who don't know, I'm very introverted. Prior to going to the UK, I was a very introverted person. So, but both of my job, my previous job, this job, they're very extroverted jobs. So when I went to the UK, I think I had a conversation with my previous employer, and they would have said, um, this is a new experience for you. Enjoy it. I hope you learn from it. And I think that was one of the catalysts. I think when I came back, I should have known that that mean that they'll be expecting more from you. And so when I get there, now looking back, I realized that that is normal for people to expect more. And so as I said, that was a challenge to know that people are expecting more from you. But looking back, I realized that it probably is normal that you have a master's, now you have more knowledge in an area. You should be able to help advance your workplace, make some kind of contribution in a positive way. So now I look back at it and I'm like, that's that is an okay expectation. It may look like it was high at the time, but I think looking back, stepping back, you realize that people's expectation of you would always be high in these circumstances. And I'm glad that it was high and that it was not that they expect me to be at the same level that I went as well. So I think when they have that expectation, that propelled me Like I wanted to show that, you know, I've learned this in there. My financial analysis has increased. I'm able to use my statistics now. I'm able to come up with tables that we can just use and get the information in a more efficient way. So I was glad to have that expectation. And also, as I said, no, afterwards, when I came back, I was able to engage in the NRA and, you know, my employer at the time would have given me a lot of the statistical work to do, and I was able to use my masters, you know, come up with tables, come up with a way of getting these information, and I was commended, and I felt great that I was commended, and I was so grateful looking back that this masters helped me to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's some really valuable bits of advice in what you've said there, and also just kind of noting that in some respect, having those expectations, it was a shock, but actually you yourself could understand where they were coming from. And I guess that helped you sort of normalize them to an extent. For some of our scholars, they will be going back to workplaces that are similar. They'll have really high expectations for what they might be doing, or they'll be going on to new workplaces where equally they'll see the master's or the PhD and the scholarship and naturally have high expectations as well. Were there any sort of points where you had to sort of, I guess, implement some skills or some mechanisms to actually say, we need to manage some of these expectations? And how did you perhaps, you know, communicate that to yourself or to other colleagues in your workplace?
I definitely, for me, I think I needed to communicate it to myself because my expectation was very high. I think, as I noted earlier, the expectation from the job was high. But for me, I feel like, I think I felt like just because I had a master's, that I was coming back and I would be promoted. Maybe I probably would get a different job. I would, you know, be at a higher level just because I have the master's. And I think I needed to communicate to myself as well. And I think, as I said earlier, I learned patience. Patience is needed. And you have to be kind to yourself. And at the same time, even though you have that degree, without the actual practical on the job training, um, you need it. You need it. It's a must because even though you have that piece of paper, that degree, it's not everything. And I think that is one thing you need to tell yourself, that getting the practical experience. Maybe it's not the job you wanted at the moment. Maybe it's not the job that you saw yourself in when you came back from study, but it's probably where you need to be at that moment to get that practical experience. And that's what I learned. You know, patience is definitely a must. On the job training is needed, and just be kind to yourself.
Mm. Yeah, again, some really great points there about, you know, you might be going back to employment and it might not be what you want to be doing immediately after your scholarship. You might have had different exposure that's making you see a new career path, but you're in a sort of comfortable position to really consolidate your learning by going back into that place. And your frustrations are valid, your impatience is valid, but it can't consume you. You have to kind of manage it as well. So I think that's a really interesting point there. And you've also said about how coming back with your degree, your piece of paper, essentially, it's not everything. There are other things sort of happening at that time. One of the things that you mentioned is making contributions to the workplace. And I guess as part of that, it's acknowledging the other people that you work with, your colleagues who haven't got that piece of paper, haven't had the same experiences as you. Was that something important to you when you returned back into your workplace, that other people also got to kind of benefit from your experiences and your new skills? And how did you sort of manage that with colleagues who might be a bit jealous or not really understand some of the new things that you were bringing?
Well, I have to say I was in a position where I had this job and I've known a lot of the people personally before I left to go to study. And, you know, a lot of them in my workplace, I have to say, I have to be I'm happy to say that a lot of them pushed me, you know, and they would, I think one of my colleagues, I had a very close colleague where I was working before, and she would always say, "Oh, you finished your master's. You should, you wouldn't know how to do this." But I would always tell her, you know, even though I have my master's, there are things that I can't do. But I know that she was trying to be supportive as well. But in the job that I do, it's the teamwork, because you know, you're going on site, it was teamwork. You may be the team lead, but it's still teamwork. You need everybody on the team to work cohesively. So I always know how to. I think I tell myself, even that I need to be humble. I still need to learn from others, even though I have, at that time, I probably was the only person in that unit that had a master's. And I know there are other people, well, apart from my superiors, but in the unit itself, I think I was the only one at that time that had a master's. But I know that I said from experience, I've learned to, you know, be humble. um, be kind to others. And even though I have that master's, I knew I could still learn from the others within the unit. They had more experience than me, more years of work. And even with the expectation of that, you can do this, you can do that because you have your master's, I still think that I could have learned from them. So that was my main thing. I needed to be humble. I needed to still learn from others. I needed to learn from the job. And it didn't come like overnight. It was a learning process. I had to learn that. I myself had to be, you know, step back, be patient, as I said, be humble about my achievements, even, and just learn from others as well. You still have to learn from others. At the end of the day, you still have to.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those interpersonal relationships continue to be just as important as the qualifications that you bring to a team. And you've rightly mentioned kind of teamwork there. But it's fantastic that you had a supportive workplace as well, and colleagues, as you've mentioned, which hopefully others on the call are going back to colleagues like excited to see them come back, but also excited to find out what they can share and show them, but also know that other people have been there longer and they've seen things differently. Everyone has a different perspective and it's just as valuable. And that's something to really kind of hold on to. We've talked a lot. I don't think anyone's going to leave this call without valuing patience. I think that's coming across so strong. And I guess one of the things then, for some scholars, they'll go back maybe a couple of years, applying what they've learned, kind of getting back into the job and working with colleagues and getting sort of that more rounded experience that we've been talking about. For you, how did you kind of know when you'd sort of run your patience out and when you were actually ready for a move? What was it for you that kind of triggered that next step in your career, that looking for a new employment opportunity or challenge?
I would say, as I would have participated, as I said, in the National Risk Assessment of St. Vincent. And I thought to myself, I love this area. I saw that its contribution to nation building. And to be honest, I always wanted to work at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank ever since I was small. So I thought to myself, you know, what best what best way can I contribute? And I figure this was the time I have the on the job training. I have a lot of risk-based analysis, which was needed in regulation and supervision. And I saw the job. I actually did not saw the job. Let me say that I actually applied for a different job at the ECCB and I did not get it. I think I was disappointed, but at the same time, as I said, I had a lot of patience at this time. I had, and I think like a few weeks after, they would have called me and told me about this new role, and I thought this is definitely the role that I wanted to be in. And you know, the pandemic was happening. It was in the height of a pandemic, and it was weird to say that you want to change your career at this moment in time. But I thought, what just take a leap of faith and do it. And the first year working with ECCB, actually we worked from home. So I was working in St. Vincent. The ECCB station is headquarters in St. Kitts, which I'm currently at now. But the first year of working with them, I actually worked from home in St. Vincent. So I think it was the right moment, the right time for me to move on because I have outgrown. I felt like at that time I've outgrown just regulation on a smaller scale because right now it's regional. Like I get to see the work within the different jurisdiction as opposed to just having one entity where I supervise. And I think like my experience in the UK also helped me to know that, to have that confidence to know that I was ready as well.
Mm. That's really helpful just to understand for you kind of what those different components were to get that feeling. And also, you've mentioned kind of the risk of changing a job during the pandemic and the sort of impact of that as well. I guess thinking as that as sort of something that a lot of us experienced either during our studies or in the workplace, and the different sort of skills that we had to develop working during COVID, living during COVID as well. For you, are there any in particular that you feel actually this experience is really important to my career development, into I'm able to sort of perform as an employee and boost my employability?
Definitely, my must. As I said earlier, I'm a very introverted person, and when I went to the UK, not just the degree itself, you know, it was definitely important going to class, learning everything. I think also a lot of the courses we had work. Here now you have to work with new people of different nationalities, people from different countries. This is the first time I've done my degree, but my first degree, but it was in the Caribbean, which we have a lot more in common than separate us, to be honest. So studying the Caribbean was not much of a challenge, but going to the UK was a bit of a challenge because now you have different countries, different nationality. And as an introverted person, I had to find my voice. I had to be more extroverted, be more confident in what I said as well. So I think not just only from an academic point of from academically I grow, I think I grow as a person as well. My confidence, my way of interacting with my way of presenting, and now in my new role, I am presenting to various financial institution management. When I go on an on-site, I'm a team lead. I have to introduce my whole team. I have to go and present my findings, my deficiencies. There will be pushbacks from these management, these people in higher up, and this is I have to find my voice and say this is what it is. This is what I see. So I think that all stemmed from my degree, and I don't think I would have been able to do that without that experience that I had in the UK.
Mm. Again, I think you've touched on a really important thing, is that our employability is not just our list of qualifications and things that we've done in a previous role. It's all of the other skills that we bring in. It's about how we problem solve. It's how we conflict manage. It's how we're able to present ourselves, present information, be challenged, understand it's not personal, because we're able to reply back because we know what we're talking about. We've got the stats. And I think you've touched on a really important part there. It is coming to the UK is a huge part of navigating that and building those skills. And rightly, they are employability skills alongside anything else on your CV as well. You mentioned a little bit earlier about kind of another thing that you were sort of very passionate about in your career move was sort of national development and contributing to national development. And I guess, again, the scholars that we've got on the call as well, their development goals, those impact statements that we've all written in our application forms, are still very important. And for you, thinking about your career move, was national development always going to be the thing, that commitment to why you undertook the scholarship? Was that always going to be something that a job had to meet? It had to deliver on those opportunities to contribute to sustainable development or national development more broadly?
Most definitely. When I took the scholarship, I didn't took it because I I remember writing in the essay that we had to write that my goal is to be engaged in national development. I think it had to I spoke around the financial impact and how the global recession had impact on the Caribbean. I didn't necessarily see myself in AML. I saw myself more in the finance realm where I look at the financials of the banks and whatnot. But after I look at after I had my interaction with the National Risk Assessment of St. Vincent, I thought, you know, this is very much nation building. It's very much something I could see myself helping my country to achieve a goal. Because as I spoke earlier, when we do national, most of our countries do national risk assessment as part of our mutual evaluation. And this mutual evaluation are then published, and if you have a bad report, you are blacklisted, and then if you're blacklisted, it have serious ramifications for us. You may not be able to trade with certain countries because you're on a blacklist. So for me, seeing that, I thought, what best way could I do? How could I do my contribution to this? And I thought, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, it served our region. So I'm not only helping my country, I'll be helping my small region and doing my small part in some way. So definitely that goal has always been there. It has changed, but it still is nation building. And I feel like I'm contributing in some way to my region's development through being part of this unit.
Absolutely. And again, another really important point you've made there is that the heart of the goal has stayed the same, but the words around the goal maybe change as you kind of get different opportunities, as your own career sort of develops in different ways, and also you chase your interests and you chase your passions, and they're not always fixed at any given time as well. So another important point there around that and how it links to your scholarship and the sort of goals and objectives that you had for that as well. I'm going to sort of come to the end, and I can see we're starting to get things through the chat box, but a couple of additional kind of questions for me. And one of them is that looking back on that period of sort of finishing your scholarship and going into employment, sort of same job, but with a new kind of version of yourself, I guess. If you could do it all again, what would you change, or would you change nothing? Was it important to live it?
I would not change, but I will definitely say enjoy it more.
Mm.
The study is going to be there. You have to study, you have to do everything. But I think just the experience, live in the moment, enjoy it more. Look, you're going to be surrounded by so much different culture and different nationalities. Learn about them. We are living in a global community now where we need to know about each other. So I say enjoy it, learn more about the other cultures, learn more about other nationalities, just have more of a community that you could always rely on. So I would say enjoy the experience and have more of a community. And I think my tip as well is that my university had a career fairs. I knew that I was coming back to my job, but I still went to it. I took tips from the recruiters and the employers. I went up and I asked, what do you want in your employees? I also took advantage of the career hubs that my school had, where they give tips on your CVs. To this day, I still use my CV from my school. And I use the tips for the interviews when I did my interview with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And I think that helped me. So I won't say change anything. I would just say utilize your service, enjoy it more, build a community, and get to know about other people's culture and their nationality.
Some great bits of advice there, and absolutely to any of our master's scholars, you've still got a couple of weeks still. I imagine being able to kind of go in and sort of chat to careers services at your university, join all the different types of workshops that they're doing around interview skills, CV writing, and just generally kind of getting their intake about kind of what's happening in job markets across the world and different sectors. So that's a really great piece of advice. And for a lot of you as alumni, when you become alumni of those institutions, those services continue to be available. And also community, we're better than the CSE's own community as well, to kind of keep talking to people across the world, because you have such an incredible connection, as well as those that you've met at your university or just through the social connections that you're making in the UK as well. So some really great tips there. And of course, always enjoy yourself, always enjoy what you're doing. It's so important. I guess then one final question from me, and then we're going to go to the chat box. And I would encourage anyone, if you do have some questions that you're thinking about, do drop them in for Suzette so we can ask them. What advice would you give to any attendees who are preparing for career advancement? And you've already kind of given a couple, but is there anything else that you think you should really make time to do this, to think about your career advancement?
Yeah, as I noted earlier, when I went to the career fairs that the school had organized, I actually went up to a lot of the recruiters, and the employees and employers, and I did ask, what do you expect? Even though you're not staying in the UK, I think it's global what employers expect from you, and it's good to hear from people when they're recruiting what they expect. Even it's my master's, okay? What other certification is necessary apart from your master's or PhD? Because some careers they require certification. So what certification is best for me at this stage? And I know for me, I was in regulation and I wanted and finance. And I remember that I went and asked, what kind of certification, if I'm in your field, would you recommend for me to do next? And learning is ever always gonna be there. It's never gonna stop, especially if you for your career. For me, I just recently completed the assessor's training. It was intense, so but I'm now a certified assessor, and I see myself always looking for different certification. In my field, because we look at the act a lot. I'm always looking what next. Should I do some kind of certificate in law? So I'm like, it's always, even when you have your degree, your master's, your PhD, it's a good thing to always look to improve yourself, look to find different, maybe short-term courses, maybe a long-term course, whatever it is. Always continuous development. I will say continuous development is necessary. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, such great advice as well, is that it doesn't stop at the end of your scholarship studies. It just continues. It gives you a whole new springboard to look for those additional opportunities. And of course, congratulations on your certification as well. That's fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that. That brings me to the end of the things that I kind of really wanted to sort of talk about and learn a lot more about your own experiences. But we are now going to hand over to scholars that have joined us. And I can see that we've already got a great question in the chat, which you're welcome to read, but I'll also read aloud for everybody else as well. So one of our attendees says, "Thank you, Suzette, for sharing your experience. What kept you going in that moment of waiting? Did you have a set of options you were considering? Did some seem easier than others?" It's a great question.
Oh, definitely. In that period between changing my employment, I was frustrated at times because I think one of the things that pushed me to do my master's was that I wanted a change, and I figured that going to do my master's would let me get a change, and that what the hair was back in the same work. So I was frustrated. I think I had other options. The one thing is that a lot of the options was that because the Caribbean, we are not as developed as other region, other different parts of the world. We are not at this developed. We don't have a developed finance sector. So my choice was limited in getting a better work per se. So I was like, maybe should I leave? Should I not? Should I stay? But as I said, one of my goals was always nation building. I didn't want to leave and contribute to the brain drain within the region, because that is one of the biggest problems within our small region, is that a lot of us get educated, a lot of us get more skills than we go on to the more developed country. And I said to myself, the reason why I take this scholarship is because I wanted to develop my region. I wanted to be part of nation building. So I think that was number one that kept me going, is that I wanted to play a part in my region development. So I said, as I said, that probably number one that kept me there. And just being patient and having good people around me as well. Let me know that your time will come, and I will get where I'm supposed to be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering. And again, it was a really great question, and so much to learn from your response there. Someone else has also messaged me privately. You are welcome to do that. Any scholars on the call, if you don't want to ask your question in the main chat, you can message myself or someone in my team privately. And I think it touches on something that you have just mentioned there at the end of that. Someone is asking about, did you sort of get involved in any networks to help kind of build your skills as well? So not just thinking about, I know you've mentioned your certifications and also your colleague support, but were there other networks that you tapped into, I guess, whilst you were in that waiting period to build your skills? And how important was that?
Oh, I was always I have like my own group of people. Unfortunately, I don't think we have an alumni network for the Caribbean. That would be something I think we need to develop more. But I've always engaged with the CST. During that time, I would look at the webinars. I was attending the webinars. um, I think also I I started doing, as I said, like I'm always thinking about learning. So I started doing my CFE. I have not finished it as yet because I moved on to AML, but I started doing that, and I have like my church groups that I've been actively engaged in, my workplace. I have good colleagues around me, and also um, I do, from my church point of view, I do volunteer doing stuff with my church as well, but not much of like as I said, I would have definitely I think, to have an alumni group within the Caribbean, even St. Vincent. I don't think we have as much scholars in St. Vincent itself, but definitely I would have loved to have an alumni group to engage with. And I also had friends from my city's days. They're not part of the CSC, but um definitely we would all speak about where we are, what next. I would have meet up. I just went to Trinidad when I did my a different Caribbean island when I did my assessors training, and I would have meet up with a few of my friends that I've made in Trinidad, and we were talking about our careers and where we are at now, and if that's what we want. And it's good to have friends, I think. So that is what I'm saying. Like, enjoy, meet new people, get know about their culture, and people do encourage you, especially when you're not where you want to be. So
Mm.
if you have friends in your alumni group, keep in contact with them. Let them help you along the way. They may not be going the way you want, but eventually I think it will get where you're supposed to be at.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, really important. Again, it's those social, interpersonal skills that you're building. And I think you're right to sort of mention that being surrounded by other people who are building their careers or making similar difficult choices as you are, even if they're not in the same sector or quite having the same experience, it's all people that help motivate you. It's all people that help kind of encourage you when perhaps you're not feeling brave enough, and that's a really great community to be in. Anyone on the call, Suzette's rightly kind of talked about the importance of alumni networks. We don't have alumni groups in all countries, but do drop us a line if you do want to reach out to people, because we can support that through the CSC's communities as well. So kind of do remember that the CSC will always be there to provide support as much as we can. I don't think we have any more. I haven't had any more messages, and I don't think we've got any additional things in the chat. So I'm going to start to wrap up, and if anyone wants to quickly drop in a final question, you can do so. But just to say again, a huge thanks to our speaker, to you, Suzette, for joining us and sharing so much about that experience post-scholarship and the navigating of your employability skills and your career, and all of the different considerations that you've had to make in that time, and all of the different pieces of advice and guidance that you've shared. And again, as I mentioned earlier, no one is leaving this session without understanding that we need to be patient, and actually we need to be kind to ourselves in that period as well. So I think I definitely feel like I feel like I know a little bit more about kind of what will be happening in that period and how to prepare for it. Do you have any final words that you would like to sort of share with the group before I wrap up today's webinar?
Just as I said earlier, you know, be kind to yourself. Especially in this day and age where you know, there's a lot going on, and remember to take a mental health break. Even if you know, you're studying, you're trying to reach your goals, you need to be kind, as I said, to yourself. Take some mental health break, and just be patient. Know that you're gonna get where you want to be or where you should be. You know, this is just a stepping stone. Getting your master's, your PhD, um, your qualification. It's a stepping stone, and two, always continue self-development. Your growth is always, no matter how accomplished you get, you still has to have continuous development, as always, you know. And I wish you, everyone, all the best with their studies, and hope it goes really well.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you again for all of your wise words. And that brings us to the end of not just today's webinar, but actually for the whole Preparing for Success series. And to everyone, that will be published shortly on the CSC's YouTube channel, and it's a lasting resource, so you can always come back and revisit the information that has been shared.